Well, we have a few more people signed up for this program, so I guess don't be surprised if we have a few latecomers. Hopefully they will not be a disruption. But I want to welcome Chief Pagenkopf to the Senior Center today. How nice of her to take her time out of her day to share information about her department with us and answer questions that we have and find out what might be on the minds of some more of the people that her department serves. So, welcome, Chief. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Just before I came out, there was a fresh email in my inbox from the Chief, and she was encouraging us to share the information in that email with everybody, but because she's here, I'll let her do it in person. So, here you go.
So, I've met a few of you, but I guess just to talk first about myself, and even before that, thank you for having me, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk with me. I think this is the best way our police agency can help our community, is having these conversations and hearing from everyone. So my name's Jenny. I'm the chief with the Oregon Police Department. I've been the chief here for about 1.5 years, but I've been with the Oregon Police Department since June of 2005. I've been in the positions of police officer, detective, detective sergeant, lieutenant, and chief now. We've had some challenges with our leadership in the past, and if you're from this community, you may have heard of some of those things. I was raised by 2 terrific parents who taught me a lot of really great life lessons, and one of them was, if you see something wrong, instead of complaining, step up and fix it. If you would ask me 10 years ago, are you going to be the chief someday? I would have said, no. But, the staff that work for me are phenomenal people. They deserve solid leadership. I'm not perfect by any means, but I work very hard every day to lead a great group of people now. So I'm very proud of that. As far as me personally, obviously I'm a mom. I got 2 little boys. One is 7. His name is Jake. He's my sweet boy. And I got a 10-year-old boy, Tyler, who's my sassy guy. And it's just great to have those different, walks of life in my home. My husband, his name is Troy. He's a detective with Walworth County Sheriff's Office. He's been there for, I think, 20 plus years. When I was a detective, my passion was sensitive crimes. I really liked, not that I, wanted these things to happen, but I was really driven to help victims of child abuse, sexual assault. That was kind of my niche as a detective. His niche is fraud investigations. So we're very opposite people. He's very analytical, numbers guy. He's actually a part of several programs that are well known nationally to help seniors with fraud and scams and things like that. He's actually certified, and I think there's only 1 or 2 in this state, to testify as an expert with these sort of investigations. So if ever that's something the Senior Center wants to lean on, I'm his wife, so I can just call him in. That's me in a nutshell with that, with my personal life. As far as things going on at the police department, so as Rachel said, I guess I'll back up. One more thing that's for my personal life, that a lot of people don't know, is actually before I became a police officer, I actually worked with seniors. I was a certified nursing assistant for about 3-4 years. I came into that job not knowing what it would be, but I hadn't worked with seniors a lot. And what I found was I created these tremendous friendships with the people I cared for. And it opened up my world to the challenges they face in nursing homes and care and finances and things like that. So I've always kind of had a special place in my heart for those matters. So I worked at the Evansville Manor for about 3 years doing that. I then got into law enforcement, and I worked for another community, but hands down, the work Rachel, Ann, and the rest of her staff do here is awesome. So I always look for ways to lean on other parts of this community that help us become stronger. So Rachel and I worked often together. I hate to pick favorites, but she's certainly one of my favorites in the community to work with. And she's got great staff. Ann, Noriko, there's just so many. That's why I reached out to Rachel, was I, as a new police chief, want to make sure that we build this bridge with you guys. And we know that we're always aware of how we can best help you guys, help the seniors. So back to today. So as Rachel brought up, weather is a big concern. And why is Rachel getting an email from the police chief? Well, another hat I wear is I'm the emergency management director for this community. So I attend a lot of meetings. A lot of them have been over civil unrest and other matters. But now today we have a hurricane-style windstorm coming. Not normal for Wisconsin whatsoever. And in fact, in talking with the National Service representative today, he's worked for their service for about 18 plus years and he's never seen this. So we just want to make sure it's like on everybody's radar. We're hoping this just deludes into something we're used to, and that it's not as strong winds, it's not as bad, but we just want everybody to be kind of on high alert. What's unique about this storm coming is Wisconsin's used to windstorms, but they're short term. This is going to be long term, and we're just not prepared, and this isn't normal for us. So we expect possible power outages, trees down, power lines down, hoping people stay off the roadway. But then, of course, people have all their Christmas decorations up. So we want to make sure those aren't flying across the community, too. So we put that out on Facebook, but what we're asking basically is for people just to walk out into their yard and kind of do a scan and look. Is there anything that's going to move? And, Rachel was already out there looking at some of the benches. And even with, like, trees near a home, if the wind hits it just right and it falls, and unfortunately it falls in the direction of your home, during the time of 8 to 10 p.m., possibly even 6 a.m. into tomorrow, will there be anybody sleeping or occupying that area of the home? Maybe just have them sleep in another area of the home. We unfortunately have had situations like that before. So that's the latest and greatest. We have that up on our Facebook, and I know the village was going to put that information out too online. The biggest challenges right now the PD is facing is, while growth is great in our community, we want to make sure public service stays at the same rate and can help our community and continue to provide the same services. I've expressed some concerns to the village board. Right now, ideally we want 2 officers on the road at all times, but that's not a requirement because we just don't have the staffing for it. So how we're able to properly facilitate the road right now with the needs that are being asked of us is we're offering overtime. Well, that's not ideal. First of all, it's going to burn out your officers. Then 2, that's very expensive. So next year we're going to try to talk with the village about giving us more staffing so we can get to a 2-officer minimum at all times. It keeps our officers safe and it helps us keep our community safer too. The calls for service have already gone up quite a bit, month to month. I report that back to the village, and I believe you hear some of that exciting news. What we're doing now is, for our calls for service, I create a monthly activity report. And what it is it's like calls that I think the community would be interested in reading about. So some of them are crashes, OWIs, drug arrests, and just a variety of things. Not what, the observer's going to put what they want into a paper. Me, I look at this as an opportunity for the chief to then tell the community, hey, this is what I think you might want to know about. In there, it also gives a monthly spreadsheet of the types of calls. So like, we handled 3 child abuse cases this month. We handled this much of sexual assaults for the month. And then what we do is we compare it current year to last year. So you kind of get an understanding of where's this all going. What we are finding since I've started those activity reports, and I believe I started them in June, is consistently there's an increase in calls for service. We're not even at full staffing right now. So it's going to be much higher as we go. So for staffing levels and budgeting, we're trying to prepare our village to start thinking about more money for public safety. There's a variety of topics I could talk about at this time, but I'd love to field questions, and sometimes I know what the questions will be, but never want to assume. You guys have any concerns or topics you want me to cover?
As long as you were talking about staffing, do you have a feel for like the new Highlands of Netherwood, thank you, and then the new free affordable housing out there. What is that population number, just from those, going to add to Oregon?
I don't know. It's a really good question, and it's also going to depend on how fast they're able to fill those units. I don't know. You know, I always think high, really high, you know, because I just want to be ahead of the curve, and it takes time to hire officers. So I envision within the next 3 years we'll be at 15,000 for population. We started at 10, so that's huge. The challenge too with apartments is that with a resident, we're more likely to have a positive interaction with that person because they come to the community events. They're more invested, like, you know, their kids go to school here, they've gone to school here for a while, so they may come to Safety Day, National Night Out, something like that. Or they at least hear about this information, whether it's through our website, village board. But with people who are living in like apartments or duplexes, they may jump in and out of communities, and so it's hard for us to always know what is going on. That can create some challenges too. And that's where we try to work with some of those businesses that run these apartment complexes to establish some sort of support mechanism so we can help before anything becomes an issue.
I have a question. Everybody, it seems like everybody in every industry doesn't have enough employees right now. And you were just saying that you guys are short-staffed. I can't imagine police work is the most popular field for young people to pick right now. And how, I mean, do you think you're ever gonna get caught up? Are you gonna find the people to fill those spots? Or what's the future of policing in terms of people coming in?
Yeah, it's a good question. So right now, I would say this exists in other professions too, much like policing, where it's public service. There's just, unfortunately, in society, it's become a little bit more acceptable to treat them a certain way. And when you have young people coming into a profession, it's hard for them to get through that, understand that, and get past that. And then add on top of it the dangers of it, policing. Now more than ever, we're seeing people argue with us over very minimal things. It could just be a simple, we stopped you, we're gonna give you a warning, but boom, they go off. These younger officers coming in, they see that, they know they're working nights, they know they're gonna be working weekends, and they start to get into that, and then they realize, hey, this isn't for me anymore. And it's easier right now for officers just to walk away. When I started, you took your lumps, you stuck with it because you knew you were in this for the right reasons. And the other obstacle we have in policing is not a lot of people want to get into this profession. And you know, Oregon pays great, but right now it's a competitive market. So you know, we're losing officers to agencies that pay a lot more. You know, Middleton, maybe even Monona. And it's tough because you invest all of that money, that time, and then to see them go and, you know, to hear from the community, gosh, I don't even know who works there anymore. I don't recognize any of these faces. What I will say, and knock on metal here, the hires we've had, for the most part, I mean, they're not all of them are gonna work out, but we have had some really good luck. You know, my very first officer I hired was Nydia Navarro. She's phenomenal. She's ex-military, she's bilingual, and she's just works and does a phenomenal job. I always get compliments on her. And we've seen that trend with some of the other staff we've added on. There's other agencies that they put a process out, they don't get any applications. That's scary. We're finding now 2 more departments are having to send people through the academy. So when I applied back in 2005, I was up against 150 other people for 2 jobs. And now, the last process we got 17 applications. So, and then you got to kind of filter out, not only who does well in an interview, who's good a communicator, who seems like they'd be the right fit for the community department, who's going to pass the background, who's going to not get picked up by another department as they're going through this process, and maybe they'll work out. One thing we do unique, it's not as unique anymore because other people are having a hard time keeping people, is if we don't send someone to the academy, they're already certified, we make them sign a 3-year commitment agreement, so they have to work with us for 3 years. If they choose to leave before then, they have to pay back a certain dollar amount. It's a way for the village to retain some of that cost. And it has helped us because our budgets are getting tighter and tighter, and I know Rachel's in the same boat. If we send them through the academy, that's a huge investment for us. Department of Justice will reimburse us the $5,000 it costs for the academy. But the hard pill to swallow is when we send somebody through the academy, they're our employee. So we pay their salary and their benefits. When I say we, I mean that the community does. And that's a risk because in the academy, that's a hands-on, hardcore training. I remember being in the academy and being literally picked up off the ground and thrown around, and you're trying to hold on to your gear and defend yourself. So it's very common for people to get injured in the academy. Well, if they're an employee, they get injured, and we're dealing with workers' comp. Now, if they can't complete the academy, we have to get them into another academy. The academies are 5 months long, and the academy is a constant pass-fail. So not only are these tests difficult, they're proficiency. One bullet misses this little target, you're done. And there's multiple tests like that. But talk about the pressure it is on a candidate that their whole life is about being a police officer, and they're in the moment. They finally got a department to invest in them, send them to the academy, and talk about the pressure they're now under as they go through that academy and passing those tests. So it's a big gamble, but it has paid off for us. And it'd actually be a step we take. We're hiring 2 right now. One works for Capitol PD. He's chosen to come down here. He really wants to be in a community-involved police department. The other one is not certified, but is a great hire. Just super enthusiastic, great communicator, be a good addition. But he's going to have to go through the academy. But so we assess that. We assess as we're looking at those candidates that we have to invest that extra amount in. Is it worth it? Because we're putting a lot into this, and this guy is definitely worth that investment. So a lot of challenges there. What I will say, and they're finding it common with a lot of the departments nationally, is that you either have your officer that sticks around 15, 25 years, and then you got your others that maybe 1 or 2 years and they just kind of fizzle out. Whether they go to a better paying job because they're just following the incentives, and it's their market to hunt down what they want, or it doesn't work out for them. It's just not the career they wanted. They don't want to be talked to like that. They don't want their family, to hear these bad things about cops, and so they leave. We do a lot under our roof that when we bring somebody in, regardless if they've been a cop before or not, we mentor them to help them prepare and process those situations. Obviously, I've been in this career almost 20 years now, and it's different. It's hard hearing, your dad say, "Did you hear what happened in Minneapolis? Oh my gosh, what's it feel like being in a profession like that where that's happening?" And it's like, it is terrible, but that's why I'm in this profession, because I'm gonna make sure that doesn't happen. So it's interesting. So one of the things I started with right when I became chief, I had wanted to do it for a while, and I came out of the gates as a chief doing it. Keep in mind so I was promoted to chief, and then boom, the pandemic hit, and then boom, civil unrest hit. Now, what did civil unrest look like for Oregon? You think we would have kind of been left out of it, but we actually were not. We had some problems, but I would say The scariest part for me as a chief was sending some of our officers up to help with the rioting and the protesting. Urine was thrown at them, rocks were thrown at them, terrible things were said to them. But I got nothing but compliments back from the leadership up there that our officers remained absolutely professional and were great examples that led. So it was good to hear, but I didn't sleep a wink when they were up there. Very scary stuff. So yeah, when I stepped in, one of the very first things I did was once a year we do annual wellness check-ins. So each officer, including myself and the non-sworn staff, goes up to a facility up in Madison where there's counselors there, and that's what they do commonly, is they just talk with an officer or someone in law enforcement and just do a check-in. See if there's something they're struggling with. They don't have to even talk if they want to, but they're paid to go up there by the village and have that opportunity. We just recognize that now more than ever, officers are put in these very stressful situations, whether it's hearing really bad details of a child abuse case or sexual assault, or being threatened, or maybe something at home. I could give you an example of like an officer's child going to school and then a fellow student saying, your officer's in a racist profession, and not only does that officer have to deal with what's going on at his work, but then trying to mitigate that stuff. So there's a lot of challenge there, but that's become a new norm, and really a lot of other agencies are doing that too. They want to make sure officers are supported and staff supported. We send our non-sworn too because they type the details of those reports. And sometimes it's just hard to see, it's just hard to hear that and type it too. It's just hard to process it, so we make sure that's there. Yeah.
What is your staff? How many do we have?
Yes.
And ratio to men and women and
Yeah, great question. So we have 20 non-sworn.
20?
Yes. And 3 non-sworn. So the 3 non-sworn are female. We have obviously the female chief. And we have 1 female patrol sergeant who works night shift. And then 1 female officer on second shift who's Hispanic. Outside of that, all male and white. We also oversee the crossing guards too. That is a challenge constantly. Unfortunately, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people have lost their ability to respect a crossing guard. And our crossing guards are amazing people. It's a lot in a person's day to not just go out there once but twice. And in this Wisconsin weather, and try to get our kids across the street safely. And sometimes people will not listen to the crossing guards and put them at risk, the students at risk. So that's certainly challenging. It's hard to find people to fill those spots because of that reason. They'll start and they'll realize this is chaos. And we even say, call us. We'll come out, we'll issue a ticket right on the spot. We have your back, but it's a challenge. We often find we have to fill some of the spots with police officers because of it. Hands down, the worst spot is Janesville and South Perry. I cannot wait till that intersection is redesigned because it is a nightmare. And after it's redesigned, we'll still have to figure out how we manage that. But that's the demographics. I would say we are a younger department, but I would say about half and half though. So it's like we have this half mark, and then you see 6 to 7 years and up. And all of those individuals are really good at mentoring. So we have that nice balance of new, fresh ideas, but then that mentoring side too, which is nice. Yeah. I talk about the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So that has been a challenge. Nationally, society has looked to police to improve on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially how they police marginalized groups, and I couldn't agree more. The hard part with Oregon is we're not very diverse, but because of the growth, we are going to become more diverse. And so what I've tried to do is be very proactive, to help whatever I can do with my position to start boosting those efforts so that we can at least do some work prior to all of this diversity hitting us. I have had the pleasure of having these individuals separately in our community come forward and say, hey, I got some concerns. You know, I'm of this certain race, and I see these things happen nationally. Can you tell me how Oregon PD does these things? And what I did is I started meeting with them individually, and we had to start having these conversations. And I would say we quickly became friends. And the conversations went really well. And ideas came from those. And then eventually I started meeting with all these individuals on their own, and I said, hey, would you guys mind meeting as a group? We could just talk about all of this. What was nice is there was representation parent side, different races, but then also our youth. There were a couple people youth-wise of a different race. And it was nice because I could take information to them and say, what do you think about this? And hear a completely different perspective, which was awesome. The village board is looking at creating a more formal process for that. I would love to see if any of you seniors would be open to it. I know that applications are available right now. The reason I think the village wants to more formalize this is because what they'd love to do is get input from this DEI committee and then have it come in front of the board and have really just different perspectives come to them with those considerations. And obviously the village board will make a final decision, but whether you want to ask questions about it now or privately later, I'm open to that. You know, I know that the village had tried doing a DEI group in the past. I only attended one meeting, so I wasn't aware if there was senior representation on there. I do think it would be great to have that. Tax base, sidewalks, all these other things. I just don't think some other people that make big decisions think about. And so it'd be good to have those voices, those perspectives in there. If anybody's interested, I'd be happy to get you more information or an application, but I guess that's my little plug-in about that. And if everybody's like, I don't want to be a part of that, I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you. For what it's worth, Rachel and I have an amazing working relationship. I would be more than happy to always bounce things off of her too. With my emergency management director hat, that's something I plan on doing, is we're looking at plans and doing so we do tabletop exercises it could be for a hurricane coming to Oregon now. I may have her involved and say, all right, what am I not thinking about, Rachel, that's in your world that you want me to know about as we're working through those plans? It may be, hey, you're not communicating enough with the manor about evacuation, or you're not taking this into consideration, and that helps me because I just can't look at it through all those different lenses on my own, and Rachel's a great resource. So those are kind of ideas involved with the DEI stuff.
So, if nobody else has a question, I'm going to ask one that seems to touch every senior's life at some point or another, unfortunately, frequently, and that is just the amount of scams that are going on all the time, whether it's over the phone, in the mail, on your computer. How much help can you guys, when should people call the police department about scams, or, Anytime. Yes, don't hesitate, because we'd rather you call us than fall victim to it. It is terrible. It's terrible finding these people. 9 times out of 10, they're not even from this country. And then trying to hold them accountable is very difficult. I'll be honest with you, what I've told my grandma, because she's fallen victim to it enough. And they target seniors, they just do. And it's really unfortunate. But for what it's worth, we've even been targeted before, the Oregon Police Department.
what I've told my grandma is, and these people are very pushy, but if ever somebody calls you and asks you for any of your personal identifiable information, or asks you for money, or asks you for wire transfers, anything like that, what I tell her is just tell them, my phone's about to die. Let me call you right back, or call me back in 5 minutes. I'm just gonna plug it in. As soon as you get off the phone, call that police department. She lives in Broadhead. Call that police department and just run it by them. It gives you a minute to just say, whoa. Because that's what they do, is they feed off that urgency and that ability for you to kind of go, whoa, wait, this doesn't seem right. One of the ones I find the most frustrating is they'll call and they'll say, we've just picked up your family member on a warrant. You need to wire us the money right now, or else we're going to ship them away. And they are very convincing. Very. And I honestly think an off-duty law enforcement person who's been in the service for a long time could even fall for it. That's how convincing these people are. They're con artists. As much as it sounds like it's so urgent, no cop is going to put you in that situation. So just, like I tell my grandma, tell her your phone's dying, call me back in 5 minutes, I'm going to go plug it in. Then call the police department. Once you get an answer from them, then proceed. There's other things, I had a family member fall to this. He's not savvy with computers whatsoever, but he must have clicked on something. He then gets a phone call and says, this is some sort of computer service. You've just had a virus detected. I need you to give me X amount of information and this and that. And he did it. Then he called me and said, this didn't feel right. And I'm like, oh no, Dad. It was my father. I said, unplug everything. Just unplug everything. And then I said, then start resetting every password you got. It took us like 3 days, but, no matter what, whether it already happened and it's just now you're dealing with the aftermath of it, or if you can take that pause button, either way, call us and we'll help you guys mitigate through it. The sooner you get us involved, the better, though. To be honest with you, we often just Google, whatever like business they say they are or phone number they're calling from. And more often than not, somebody's already put an alert online about it. But, with our staff, they're trained in how to detect that stuff too, and they can help you. I'm all for making sure you shred your documents when you throw them away. And be careful with transactions on an electronic device. I always err on the side of caution. I still mail checks, which drive like my phone company nuts, but just be careful with it. What I do personally is I take one account, and if I'm going to do any online, whether it's banking or paying certain things, I just use that, and I only keep a select amount of money in there. That way they can't take everything. But yeah. And I could certainly bring in a detective sergeant to really provide a ton more information on frauds, but we investigate them thoroughly, but they're very frustrating because it takes a lot for somebody to catch the attention internationally, and a lot of these are international. So.
Is it best to not answer the phone? I mean, we get in phone calls probably, and they're lessened now that we're past December 7th, but we get all these calls and I can tell they're the same number, and I just don't answer.
That's totally acceptable.
If I don't know the number, I don't answer, because I'm still getting so many robocalls.
Yes. Yeah. And so also know there are apps people can put on their phones. So I could call you from the Oregon Police Department, but if I put this certain app on my phone or a device, I can make it look like I'm calling from your bank, a hospital, a jail.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that too.
A lot of Oregon numbers come up.
Yes. Yeah, and they've even used us. We've had scammers call people living in the town of Oregon and say, this is the Oregon Police Department. You need to wire us this amount of money or we're gonna take your, and luckily the woman in that situation called us and said, what? No, don't wire that money. And scamming always involves wiring, and why wiring? Because it's hard, it's impossible to track. It's just a number and the money's gone. And that number that is used to wire that money, that number can be punched in anywhere. So they could say they're from Oregon, but it could be Africa where they pick up the money, or Asia, you never know. It's untraceable. And they do it with gift cards too sometimes.
How is your staff, I guess, educated about mental health issues?
Yes, great question. So when I stepped in, we had mental health training before that. That is a priority with me. That's one of the priorities I came in with. We look at training, and there's a ton of training out there, especially with mental health. You know, anything that's hot topic, these companies jump on to get the money. But we wanted to find training it's actually evidence-based. Like, there's change that happens from it. This isn't just a check off, on a list. So what we found to be very effective was crisis intervention training. We call it CIT training. The biggest challenge with police and training is we always have to cover the road. We're short-staffed. We always have to cover the road.
Oh, right.
And we're short-staffed. But then we have this days, seconds, nights. So we have all these shifts to kind of mitigate through. So like for the village hall, they did training. They just shut the place down. All staff would go to the training, and that'd be great. For us, what we have to do is we have to identify dates, and then we can send 2 people this day, but then we're gonna have to double back these people to cover that, and then it just kind of, so it's challenging to say the least. CIT training is also a week long, but it's good. It's worth it. So what we've been doing, and unfortunately pandemic hit, so that shut everything down. So when I say CIT training, that's through NAMI, National Association of Mental, is it intelligence or something like that? So we've been able to pepper people in, sending them. And in fact, in February, we're sending at least 2 more. But what I have found taking over is, number one, our veteran officers are some of the best instructors in the county. And 2, the logistical issues with trying to get staffing and road, it's just easier for us to make an instructor in it. And then that way, not only can we provide all of our staff the training faster and for less cost, but also as new people come in, we can hit them with it too. So then we have that consistency. I think NAMI, as we work through the years, is also going to continue to do improvements on their training, which will be good. But the evidence-based side of it is, in talking with another police department that's already implemented this, they already saw significant change in how there was a decrease in use of force, and there was more voluntary admits for mental health versus kind of forcing the emergency detention. So what that tells me is that training forces officers to slow way down. It forces them to talk more and have a better understanding of the challenges that person's going through at that moment, and help them get through it to a better resolution. And that's what we're seeing too now that we're starting to get that implemented as well. We just actually looked at some of the numbers for mental health, and overwhelmingly, so like when we get a person who's suffering from mental health, there's a couple different directions it's gonna go. Number one, if we contact Journey Mental Health, they're the experts. We're there to just facilitate how to best keep this person safe in this interaction. We're there for some reason, whether it's a disturbance, a domestic, they simply called for help because they're in a mental health crisis. There's just a lot of things. But we'll call Journey Mental Health and say, this is what we got. What should we do? They're the experts. And they'll either A, tell us, and they'll talk to the person too, and the family, and it'll be either be A, all right, we've come up with a safety plan. They're gonna stay home. We're okay with that, but they're gonna call if they need anything else, and that's fine. That happens some of the time. There's other times where Journey Mental Health will say, we want you to take them to the hospital to get evaluated, and then we'll follow you through with the case. If it's a hospital, then ultimately we're at a crossroad. So either A, they're gonna voluntarily admit themselves. They're gonna say, I need help and I'm signing the paperwork, I'll do this voluntarily. Or B, if Journey Mental Health thinks this person, like, cannot be let go. They need to be, I wouldn't say detained, but in protective custody, and left with the hospital. That's where we as law enforcement have to step in, because we have that authority to make that determination. We obviously don't make that alone. We do that with Journey Mental Health. If the hospital can't take them, we call it an ED, emergency detention. If the hospital can't take them, we then take them to Winnebago. Why Winnebago? That is the closest facility. There is a new one in Middleton, but they're really small. So often it's Winnebago, and that is a long drive for anyone in mental health crisis in a police car. It's not a good solution. We as police chiefs in Dane County have been fighting for years to get that changed. That's one of the challenges I have, is society looks at policing like you're not doing the right things with mental health. There's got to be other ways to, they have to allocate more money and more resources to take those off our plate. And we've been fighting for that for a while. In looking at the statistics from I believe it's 2018 to current, for mental illness cases we've been involved with, overwhelmingly, it's increased where our officers have been able to talk individuals into voluntarily admitting themselves. That tells me our officers are taking a lot of time to set up a rapport with people. They're working really well with the families to get that support on too. And that's where we all want it to go. We want these people to, want this too, not us to push it. So that's where that's headed. My goal, it's been my goal for a while, but the staffing, it's gonna take some time. But I wanna create a mental health program that our community, or our police department offers to our community. What's that look like? I think it's gonna start out with 2 people from our department. One teaching mental health, training to officers, and maybe even some sort of class for community members that want to attend. But then, in my opinion, this community, we have mental health issues here. The problem is the acceptable policing for mental health in the past has been, police come, they get Journey Mental Health involved, and then they go, okay, I'm out. I watched the sheriff's office, they use their community deputies to do this, and I think it's phenomenal. What they do is they assign a community deputy to some of these cases. And they identify the mental health issue, they identify the resource they're now connected to, but then that deputy stays there and stays with that family and advocates for them and supports them. Because there's no support out there for those families. It's just kind of this, here's the service, good luck. And I think we can do better as police to not just show up, be that person that drives them somewhere and disconnects. I think families are going to communicate better with us if there's challenges in the home. And I think people suffering from mental health crisis may reach out for quicker if they know, oh, this person's really advocating for me. They really care. There's a lot of services out there. There's some that don't work, some people don't like, and then there's some really great ones. So it's going to be great to have a few of our officers really involved and can help mitigate some of those issues. So.
From my knowledge, if you have a patient that needs to be taken to the hospital, as you said, if they voluntarily admit themselves, that's one thing. But most of the time, they're going to have to be evaluated, talked with a psychiatrist, which can take 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to have that conversation, and then they may or may not be admitted.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, what you're saying is good, but it's not as simple as just taking them there.
Agreed. Yeah, and until the hospital officially takes them from us, they're our responsibility. And if the hospital calls back and says we're having problems with them again, we're the agency that has to come back, not Madison, not UW. So yeah, you're totally right. We actually looked at the time duration for these type of calls. And yeah, you're talking 3-4 hours, easily. Winnebago trips, it's even more. Because officers don't show up and just try to push this through fast. They're at the home, they're talking with this person, they want cooperation, they wanna make sure the person's comfortable. They wanna know everything, they want Journey Mental Health to talk to them. So there you're talking 1 to 2 hours. Then, if it's a Winnebago run, that's hours away, and we have to send 2 officers for the transport. Some counties can get away with an ambulance doing the transport. There's not a lot of ambulance services around here that aren't gonna do it for an affordable cost. It's a lot of liability. So logistically, very challenging. And that's why it's great. Our officers do a phenomenal job of taking these trainings. So we're not doing just CIT. We do a lot of other mental health training, but I would say that's the best one. But we're seeing benefit from it already. When we can get those individuals to admit themselves, we can get out of there faster, number one. But two, they're recognizing that they need the help. And I think they're gonna be more open to it, accepting it and the treatments. Middleton just opened up a new facility. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But with Middleton, the challenge is they don't take combative people. Unfortunately, sometimes people are combative. So that's where, unfortunately, that's that Winnebago run. And very challenging. Trying to transport somebody that far who's combative and suffering from mental health crisis.
So when they are combative, are they sometimes put in handcuffs?
Yes, yep. Yep, that is our policy.
That is a policy.
Yep, yep. We need to make sure they're safe, they can't harm themselves, and also that our officers are safe too. Yeah.
Do we have a police officer that's full-time in the high school?
Yes. So he's a full-time school resource officer, but he is expected to cover wherever he's needed in all schools. So he's at the 2 elementary schools in Oregon, the middle school, the intermediate school, the high school. And I will say this, he is spread thin, very busy. Brooklyn Elementary and Forest Edge are not in our jurisdictions, which can be challenging. We always have to kind of check in with those communities to make sure they're okay with our SROs going in there, because it's kind of playing in the neighbor's yard, not our own. Both at this time are okay with us, our SROs being like a mentor, because eventually they will come to Oregon schools locally. But outside of that, we don't take calls for service at those schools. Those are still handled by those respective communities.
Which I'm glad to see, because Madison took those cops out of it. And then here we are, gonna be problems again.
Yeah, and we've been down the road with some of those arguments. I know some community members have expressed concerns about our SRO program. And my thing is, you can always improve a program. We can always talk about those issues. But to simply just cancel it is just not a good idea. Not with the types of calls we're handling as a school resource officer. Honestly, I wish the school my kids go to had an SRO. And so I would expect nothing less from the community I serve too.
That's kind of scary.
It is.
So basically, you need more personnel.
Yes.
So they're raising taxes, they have money to spend for other things. Why isn't police a priority?
I think it is a priority. I think it's just this community is growing so fast in such a short period of time, and I think the pandemic has not helped. What I've expressed to the board is I think this is going to hit hard and fast. So the discussion we're going to have next year, they now know it's coming. So I think as they're now looking at the projects coming, they have this in the back of their mind. Another thing that we lean on quite often is grant money. I'm sure much like the senior center. Grant money, yeah. And we're being told, don't expect anything. And it's pandemic time, money is getting shifted around to help cover other things. And we understand that. But that's how we get some of our equipment, whether it's our firearms, our tasers. It's going to be tight for a while. But the staffing, this 2-officer minimum is certainly at the top of my list. And I think it surprised a lot of people, to be honest with you. I actually asked another woman I work with on another group, and she's lived in this community for a really long time, and I asked her, at one given time, how many officers do you think we have on minimally? And she's like, oh, at least 5. Like, God bless you. But no, and I told her, and she was like, that's gotta change. And I said, yeah, I agree. If we could just at least.
The population of Oregon has grown so much, so we do need more officers.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and we're starting to see the early stages of it. So second shift, hands down, is our busiest shift. So that's your 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And, such a variety on that shift. We could get the real small calls, like a woman who's locked her keys in the vehicle, or kids fighting in the park, or it could be your full-on domestic, an intoxicated person, an overdose. So it's just this big variety compared to nights where it's OWIs, days where it's day shift type stuff. And what we're finding is we haven't seen these situations a lot, but they're bumping up a little bit as we go, where people are getting upset that it's taken so long for an officer to get over it. And that starts to hit those red flags too, because people have an expectation of service in this community. And I want to keep up with those expectations. But second shift is going to be the most difficult, and people get upset. Well, what do they do? And it could be over something very minor. And I think the last one was a gentleman was parked in a parking lot and got door dinged. The other door swung open and dented his door. He got so upset he called 911, which is actually against the law. You can't call 911 for a non-emergency, but he did it because he was upset. Well, we're trying to fix those situations too.
Semi-related to what you're talking about and increasing staff, are you looking at increasing the administrative part so there's somebody there dispatched that we call directly here instead of after 4 or 5 o'clock, whatever, that it has to go through Madison? And then related to that, why is my age necessary to get help if I call?
So what they're trying to do is the call takers, first of all, she's trying to expedite the call. So when the officer shows up, they already have your information. That's the only purpose of that, so that they can get in, help you, and leave. We take your date of birth because we need to document exactly who we talked to when we handled that call. Because unfortunately, there are people with the same name, but the date of births get different. So we want the most accurate information in our record system. So that's the reason for that. We now ask too, what's your phone number and what's your email address? Because the DA's office rather communicate via email as our court, some other people that our information goes to. As far as dispatch center, so if we were to change to a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week dispatch center, that would be a significant undertaking because we would have to have a completely different setup. We would need a lot more staffing. And for the size we are right now, it doesn't meet those needs. Now, if we really boomed, that would always be obviously in the back of my mind. But like Stoughton is an example, Whitewater's another example where they have their own dispatch centers. There's a lot of challenges there because you go down 1 to 2 people and then facilitating that service is almost impossible. So what we do is we forward everything to the sheriff's office and they dispatch us out. Going back to staffing levels, another reason why we're trying to fight for more officers is, so I used to work for Evansville Police Department and your backup was nowhere around. I remember I was on a call where a guy was trying to run me over while I was on foot with his vehicle. And it took backup 15 minutes to get there. And honestly, I didn't know if I was gonna walk away. And he was coming from Edgerton, got there, and we were able to subdue the person after quite a fight. But that was a real eye-opener for me. That stuck with me for a long time. And keeping that obviously in the back of my mind, right now, and that's one of the great things about Oregon. We have these other communities around us that can back us up. Dane County Sheriff's Office, primary backup, great backup. They've backed me up on some really scary calls, and our other officers. Fitchburg has come down every once in a while. Stoughton will come over sometimes. And we've even had, back when Brooklyn was here, they'd come up. Very rarely Verona, it'd have to be something pretty big. But now those departments are also seeing their challenges with staffing too. So I have that kind of in my mind too, is we're looking at 2 officer minimum. That's yet another reason, is because Brooklyn no longer has a police department.
Right.
So we're relying on sheriff's office, which they're great, but they are stretched thin too. And Stoughton, they're stretched thin as well. They have, their staffing challenges. Fitchburg, they're soon going to take over part of town of Madison, PD's jurisdiction, because eventually they will be phased out. So all of that's happening as well. So we're just trying to be very, we'll pay close attention to that. Yeah.
What type of situations determine when you take your dog?
So right now she's retired, so we don't
dog.
have a dog.
Right.
Yeah. So the situations where we may use a dog is if we suspect, situations to be situations where we suspect drugs are in a car, or which is unfortunate lately, we've been dealing with these things where it's a stolen auto. I can tell you, we had a vehicle stolen here in our community and we recovered it 2 days later. I actually found it and we didn't have a dog available. So we asked another jurisdiction's dog to come down. We were really lucky because it was Madison and they're far away, they're busy, but they were willing to come down. They did a track and that information helped us get a search warrant. And we were able to get into the home of the person we suspected did the burglary. And sure enough, yeah, it paid off. We had, 4 or 5 years ago, we had Max Creek, the gun store there was burglarized. Where that came in really helpful, and that was another jurisdiction's dog. We didn't know if the suspects were still inside the business because we were within seconds of that alarm going off. So we actually sent the dog in first to detect if anyone was inside before our officers went inside. What's great about that is it lowers the chances of lethal force. If we can get that information that somebody's inside, that slows everything way down. And that maybe we have a barricaded subject type of situation. And we'll start calling more resources in and we'll start talking to the people and asking them to come out. But luckily in that situation they had left already. The dog confirmed nobody was inside so that our officers were able to go in a safer situation. And that certainly lowers down, the high alerts. Other ways we've used canines is to find people, lost children. They can pick up a scent. What's really interesting is, let's say me and 2 of other patrol guys get a call that this child's just gone missing. One of the last locations they were at was right here. That dog's gonna come, he's gonna smell the area, but then he's also gonna smell us. He's gonna get our scents too. So that as he then starts that track, he or she, they know what our scents are and to ignore them, but then stay on that child's scent and find this child. We had our canine vending, is recently retired. She's having a retirement party today actually, if we don't blow away. She was requested by the city of Madison and she tracked, I think it was a driver of a vehicle that hit a pedestrian. And I think the pedestrian sustained some pretty significant injury and then ran from the accident. Vende and the handler were actually able to track that suspect and apprehend them. So that was excellent. Our canine specifically also has worked with the drug unit for Dane County, which is great. She got a lot of work in there doing search warrants, doing searches on vehicles, and that's at a whole nother level of what they're seeing. And Vende was a part of finding, and we're talking hundreds of grams of heroin. And heroin is, incredibly fatal. That's where you're really seeing your fentanyl, your overdoses, and these people struggling with addiction is that heroin. It's the more we can get that off the street, the better.
So are we gonna get another dog?
Fingers crossed, yes. I would hope January to February. It'll take some time, because, so in January, I plan on taking to the village board a new policy. I do want to make the program better, and more of what I think the community needs based off, especially off these burglaries and these auto thefts. I want this dog to be able to just work and work effectively. If the board approves that policy, then what we would do is we would start finding a kennel, a dog, and then a handler. And then all of that would kind of be put together, and then they move forward with more training and then hit the road. So it takes some time, but then you really get the right product.
What determines who becomes a handler?
Yeah, so what we do is we put out kind of a special assignment opportunity. The officers will consider it. There are benefits to being the canine handler, obviously because the officer's taking care of the handler or the canine at home, so they do get, I believe it's some sort of stipend. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but you know, and then they have to meet with us and kind of explain why they think they should be it. And there's a process for it, the application process. But then we will make that selection and move forward. And it's not a promotion, it's an appointment. But it's a commitment. It's between 8 to 12 years, depending on how the dog's health is. Vende, she put in 11 years, and she was 12 years old, and she retired. That's pretty good. We got our money's worth with her. And a terrific worker. She's having a hard time with retirement. She sees her handler go to work and she gets pretty upset when she doesn't go with. But yeah, she's a good family dog too. Very, very good with the public and those events and stuff like that. Well liked.
So your last officer wouldn't be the new handler?
He's welcome to apply. We just leave it kind of broad.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is we'll take a look at who's interested. We do that for a couple reasons. Number one, we want our staff to feel like everybody's treated fairly. Would the current handler bring a lot to it? Yeah, because they'd have all that experience. But we also want to make sure we're providing opportunities to all of our staff, kind of as a retainment thing too. And who knows, you know, in these interviews we may learn some different things too about other officers who are interested. It is a lot of commitment though, so I don't see a ton of interest in it. I think it's just those certain people that really are motivated to do that specific type of work. But we do assist other agencies. There's no guarantee there's a canine on at all times in any particular community, so we all watch out for each other. So Verona may have a dog on, we don't, they'll be more than happy to send one over if they can. We're the same way, and we all help each other out. And it's worked out really well.
What is your, a lot of times when the EMT has been called to a residence or any place, a police car comes also.
Yes.
I guess I need to have that explained, that reasoning.
Yep. There's a couple things there. Well, so right now we're kind of in this, the officer makes the determination because of the pandemic. You know, we don't want to get to too many EMS calls that were not needed. Many times we get there first. And if this is a call where breathing's an issue, or worst case scenario, pulseless non-breather, there's no heartbeat, no breathing, we want everybody going. Sometimes we get vague information. There's other times where we've been at calls and something doesn't seem right. But we're more trained to recognize that than other people. It may be, you know, I fell down and I have a laceration here. How did you fall down? And you get this explanation, like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, then as you're talking to them, they seem really intoxicated. It just helps to kind of put all the pieces together. We definitely go to calls where it's a child, because while on the surface it may look, and it most likely will be, some legitimate thing, our officers are trained to come in there and kind of look at it differently. And, well, you know, my child who's 5 years old just had a seizure, you know, but they're out of the seizure now. You don't have to come. And there's other reasons children have seizures. Sometimes it's because they're shaken. Sometimes it's because of their heads, you know. And if we sense something's wrong, we can then take this a different course. We have a group of doctors we can work with. We would call in detectives and we could push it that way, or at least have them aware of it. It'll be on their radar. You know, there's other times our officers go to EMS calls because our EMS is still dealing with something else. And so the next EMS service that could come is typically Brooklyn. If it's a really, really bad call, town of Madison will come down because they got paramedics, or Fitchburg will come down. But if we know there's a delay, even if it's a minor EMS call, we'll go because we just don't want that person sitting there wondering what's going on. If we're available, we'll go. Because we also assume we may not have all the information. We're only getting what dispatch has collected so far. But there are also calls we don't go to. We allow our officers that ability to make that decision. When we were in COVID, we tried to stay separate from EMS as much as possible, so there was no cross-contamination. But now we're starting to move back into norm, whatever normal is.
Did all your officers have their shots?
That I can't say because that's protected information.
So they're not like the NBA, huh, where all the players have COVID?
I can say this, the village has not taken the stance of requiring any staff member to get the vaccination. So I think that's the best way to answer that. Outside of that, the village, I don't think would take the position of saying who exactly has been vaccinated.
Because some departments are requiring their officers to be vaccinated.
Yep.
But you are not taking that stance.
That is not a stance I can take, that would be the village.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do they still hold court over here at the police station?
They do, but the judge is doing her proceedings virtually.
Is doing what?
She's doing them virtually through Zoom.
Virtually.
Yeah, but we're busier than ever. Lots of OWIs, and fights and stuff like that. They go to her. So like disorderly conduct, drugs, minor drugs.
Can one still go in and sit and watch, or not?
Sit and watch, like for us.
The court, just how the court works and everything.
So if you mean police, if they sit in on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's in session, like a normal in-session court date, yeah, we have an officer there who acts kind of as just the officer of the court. But with the Zoom, that's not needed. So she does her proceedings via Zoom with the court clerk and prosecution and defense. The only time officers go for Zoom or trials is, or proceedings, is if they're subpoenaed to do so, which is quite often.
There's a what?
It's quite often that they get subpoenaed for municipal court.
That's what I thought she said too, Nancy.
I didn't hear the word subpoena.
No,
It
yeah,
seems like there's a lot of break-in in cars and
yes,
in garages and things going on in people's backyards and
yeah.
what? It just doesn't seem like this is the quiet Oregon that it used to be.
Yeah, so this is happening, and I would say it even stretches to Milwaukee. That's where we're seeing these people. We're catching them. We're pretty effective.
I mean, people from Milwaukee are coming here.
Some of them are Milwaukee, some of them are Madison, Sun Prairie, Oregon.
The ones
And-
that are doing the break-ins.
Yes,
Yeah, okay,
yep.
okay.
And I would say your average age is 12 to 16. And some of them we've caught before, and they do it again. So, and some are what we call opportunists. They will strike because the opportunity's there, but will flee as fast as they possibly can as soon as they're seen. There's others, though, that are more aggressive. And it's, a 50-50 chance which one you get. What I can tell you, so our night shift, not all communities are doing this, but our night shift, what they do is they drive around the village nonstop, and they look for open garage doors. Because these opportunists, that's exactly what they look for. So our officers will knock on the door, and it doesn't make our residents too happy sometimes, because it may be 1 a.m. when they finally see it, but they'll knock on the door and try to wake them up to close your garage door. Because what these people will do is they will, if the person's left the door unlocked between the garage and the house, they'll go right in. Or they'll take the garage door opener, and honestly, if somebody took mine and I didn't use it for the day, I wouldn't even know. Well, they'll come back at a later time and open up that garage and go right into the home. They'll steal cars, and so we wake these people up. I would say 70% are very appreciative, and they'll close the garage door. I'd say 15 to 30% are upset. And sometimes they won't even come to the door anymore. They'll just close the garage door and the officer just is left standing out there. But it's helped a lot. We've also so we track our vehicle pursuits on a yearly basis. So at the end of the year, I should take that back. Every time we have a pursuit, I get a memo from our lieutenant. It says, we had a pursuit. Here it is. Here's the details. He does a review of it, and if anything could have been done differently, or if a policy was violated, it's addressed immediately. But we always want to be at the top of our game. We want to learn as we go. So we track the pursuits that way, but then also at the end of the year, he sends me a review of all the pursuits we've done. I will tell you easily this year we've had more pursuits. And why is it? It's because of these vehicles driving through our community at 1, 2 in the morning, and our night shift comes across them, and suddenly, boom, they fly out of town. We have to use what we call due regard when we're in a pursuit. And if our officers see this happen, they'll try to stop the vehicle. But in that moment, they're thinking, is this worth it? This is a stolen vehicle, it's very serious. But I could potentially be dealing with a 12 to 15-year-old here driving this vehicle at 100 plus miles an hour. Am I doing more harm or more good by pursuing? And we'll shut it down 9 times out of 10. We'll air the information out to the rest of the county, and then the county will start watching for it. 9 times out of 10, what we find is the vehicle will be left abandoned in some other community, and we recover it. Whether it's been involved in a crash or not is another thing. But that's always kind of that weight that's put on police shoulders. And it's tough because you're sitting there and you know people are struggling right now. And losing a vehicle, that's how people get to their job. That's how people get their kids to places. And so they need that vehicle back. And you know they feel unsafe. And by capturing this person, it brings them some sort of closure. But you have the other side of it, of the potential of this kid, because they're being chased by a cop, putting somebody else at risk. So it's that balance of due regard. And our officers do a really good job of making that decision. And they support each other too. So you may have one officer calling it out and the other officer saying, let it go, just let it go. And they work together really well. And obviously our supervisors get involved too. But that is something we're seeing. Our police department has committed to working with another group to really work aggressively in combating these issues of the auto thefts, the burglaries, and the other suspicious activity. So we're constantly communicating, and can't elaborate too much, but we're using some other means to work through those. Yeah.
It sounds like you have a full plate.
Oh, you know.
Well, we all do as a community.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's been a difficult couple of years, but certainly blessed with the people I get to supervise and the department heads I get to work with, and the community I get to serve. So, glass half full, or mostly full, I should say.
I'm actually amazed that the community functions as safely as it does once I realized how few officers were out there keeping track of everything that was going on. Because I could have easily been that person who said, how many officers do you have out on the street? Well, I would guess at least 3 at any one time.
Yeah. And so I will say this. I don't know if I've covered this yet. With that minimum, we typically have more officers on than one, though. Because what we do is we offer overtime. And we'll offer that overtime. Only concern I have is as we're dealing with these staffing issues, burnout. You never have all staff seeking out overtime, just like any other workplace. It's just those few people that are like, I want overtime all the time. and then all of a sudden they burn out. So we really want to get that added on staffing so then we can dilute this overtime a little bit. But we still have good coverage for now, thanks to some of those officers that really like to pick up the overtime. But that only will get us so far.
What percentage of the staff lives in Oregon?
I think, I guess on ballpark 15-20. That's just totally off the top of my head. What you'll find nowadays, so way back when I started, that's a lot of cops lived in their own communities. Now with the perception towards policing, you're not going to find that. And in fact, a lot of police departments and county sheriff's offices have gone away from that residency requirement for that very reason. They want their officers to just go home, disconnect, and not have to worry about, well, my kids go to the school district, and I know this about this teacher, or I know this about this person. It's like, no, just shut it all down. And I think that's helping right now. I'm hoping we hit a curve and we go back the other direction a little bit, but that is certainly more the norm of people not living in a community. I would like to share a story about that, actually. I had an anonymous person forward some information on to me about one of our officers was looking at a house in our community, and a person recognized him. He was dressed in plain clothes, jeans, sweatshirt, hoodie. I think he even had the hoodie sweatshirt up. But that one of the neighbors recognized him and put out on social media complaining that this officer was looking at a house right next to her. And that's what I mean. You know, it's that, and you're supposed to be excited about buying a home and living in the community you serve, but that's just the reality of it right now.
Well, my daughter was harassed by teachers.
I'm sorry.
When George picked them up for speeding or whatever, and she just harassed my daughter. And that was the teacher.
Yeah.
George didn't want to get involved. I did. As a mom, the moms can get
A
involved.
lot of teachers don't want to live where they teach either, or in the town where they teach.
And I think there's just this strain on professions that serve the public right now. You're seeing it in nursing and medical, you're seeing it in teaching, you're seeing it in fire EMS, policing. They're feeling this strain. Personally, I hope I'm wrong, but I think you're going to see in all those professions, they get real thin and they change. And then I would hope we push through those times and maybe they're treated a little better. I tell you, one of the things I did when I took over as chief, when we hit that pandemic, our department did a video. And we always get support, we get support from others, you know, being as a professional, you know, thanks for keeping our community safe and things like that. We actually did a video to support the healthcare workers out there. Because, you know, we knew they were going into some tough times, some tough criticism. And they were really in the trenches. So I think what I think is going to happen is you're going to find these different entities in public service are going to start to connect more and support each other. And good will come up from it. That's a great question about living in the community. Yeah. I'm hoping it swings back the other way. And you know, this, for me, I'm a very frugal person. I don't know anything new. I hate buying new cars. The idea of asking for more money for officers, you know, I know the village administrator knows this, and I think the board's learning quickly with me. If I'm not asking for it, you know, if I'm asking for it, it's serious. Because I know this is going to put strain on our taxpayers. That's not what I want. I just want to make sure we give people what they've always had and are still expecting for public safety.
If there's no other questions, I would second Karen. Karen said you guys have a lot on your plates. I think it's more like a buffet table. You have like an overloaded buffet table to deal with, but.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll talk about a few programs we have coming up next year.
Sure, buffet
Is there
tables?
anything that we can do to help you?
Ideas. If you guys have ever have any ideas, I love ideas. I'm just too much of a cop now. I've been in this world for a long time, and sometimes just can't look at this from the other angles. So if you ever have any ideas, let me know. A couple programs would come up for next year, depending on staffing levels, but fingers crossed. With two of our officers, Officer Hatfield and then Officer Nadia Navarro, I've sent them to become instructors in self-defense. What I want to do next year is offer a course, depending on the level of interest out there, for females in our community to teach them self-defense. I think it's a really awesome way to have positive interaction with the females in our community, make them feel supported. Going back to mental health, the females in our community are most impacted by mental health. So maybe that's a way to kind of start pulling in that. I don't know, we'll see. We're gonna still continue to work towards that mental health team that the PD will provide. That, I don't anticipate extra cost with that. That's just more the personnel, being able to actually have those officers leave the road to go do those things. Another cool thing that came up. So, are you guys familiar with the Optimist Club? No? It's this group that meets and they fundraise to help youth in any way they can. And they're fantastic. It's actually, it's kind of like a nice highlight for the day when I get to meet with the group because it's just so much positivity. Maynard Stair, who I'm sure some of you are aware of, the whole reason I came into the world of the Optimist Club was because of him. He's been a long time member. And if you don't know this about Maynard, he's a retired state trooper. So he did a lot of stuff with the Traffic Association. So I went to this Optimist Club meeting after Maynard had kind of retired from the group. And one of the members had asked me, hey, would you be willing to do a video to kind of help educate young new drivers on what a traffic stop looks like? What they should do during a traffic stop, because they don't teach that in driver's ed. My dad used to be a driver's education teacher. I asked him and he said, no, we don't teach that. I'm like, perfect, we'll help with that. So we put together a video. It's available on our website if you guys are interested, but it went really well. We actually used a student about that age too, that lives in the community as the driver, and then we had a high school intern who was the passenger. It was really neat. But more came of that. We started talking, and so next year what we're gonna do, again based on interest, is offer, it might be just an hour-long class on a Saturday, but parents can either A, come with their student or their child, or they can send their child, but we'll teach them certain things. We can talk about traffic stops, but then also what to do if you're involved in a traffic crash. We find a lot of people get out of the vehicle, and it's like, no, unless it's a life safety issue, stay in your vehicle, because you will very likely get hit by a car. Another thing is what to do if power lines are down, and they're on the vehicle, and they're live. These are things that, to my knowledge, are covered in driver's education. So we're also looking at partnering with some of our auto mechanic partners in the community, and maybe they can come in and teach students how to safely change a tire. My hopes are to really target, you know, kind of those families where it's a single parent family, where maybe there's somebody not in the home that can teach that sort of stuff, and we can help support and be that add that positive interaction. Lastly, the other big project we're working on is the curriculum for a Citizens Academy. So people in the community can come to our academy. It'll be very hands-on, hopefully exciting, and they can learn what we do. My goal with that is not to defend what we do, but rather show people what we do, and maybe they want to provide a different perspective, or maybe they just want to learn. You know, like a small example of learning about something new is our tasers. People think those tasers are the best thing ever. They are incredibly challenging, especially for Wisconsin people. There's a lot of logistical issues. First of all, when you shoot a taser, it goes like this, and it keeps going like that. So the farther you are away, the worse it gets on whether or not you're going to hit your target. Secondly, for Wisconsin, you wear thick coats. Those prongs only go in so far, so a thick coat you might not get through. In society, I think people often ask, why didn't you just tase them instead of using deadly force? Because there's a good chance that that's not going to work. And if a person's closing distance on an officer and they have a knife or a gun, the chances of that taser properly deploying, you're putting that officer's life in risk of, and it's over a taser. It just kind of starts to connect why we don't sometimes use a taser. And we're gonna talk about why. You know, there's this theory out there, did you really have to shoot them in the chest? Why couldn't you have just shot them in the leg? Well, people don't stop in this deadly fashion just because you shoot them in the leg. You know, there's a lot to it. We're also going to talk about the culture in our PD. I've had a lot of questions about that. You know, what's changed? What's it like there? Are the officers supported? What are we doing regarding working with marginalized groups in our community? What are the challenges? What kind of training are we doing? What's that training look like? We're actually going to set up scenarios where you're in front of a big monitor and you're actually put in these situations that officers are in, and you have to like handle these situations. So we're hoping it'll be fun, informational, and I've heard quite a bit of interest in it, so we're going to try to meet those interests with that. I think those are the big main ones coming up. Yeah. So yes, definitely a lot on the plate. But we got a good staff that is ready and willing to do it. So, and thank you for bringing up our SRO program. So that we collect a lot more data. I'm a big data person. I like to look at the numbers. I like to see the trends. And we're constantly improving the program, but what we're trying to push out now is more information about like what kind of training is the SRO going to, what types of calls are they dealing with in these schools. It's very protected information, but the more generic we can make it, we can try to get that information out. That's what people want. They just want more of an understanding of what's going on.
It's too bad that the village can't pay for some of this instead of always the police department paying for some of these officers in the school.
Well, so the school district pays for, I believe it's 60% of the officer.
Okay.
Because then in the summer, the officer goes back to the road. But honestly, what ends up typically happening is the SRO doesn't take much, if any, time off during the school year because he really does care and he wants to be up there to mitigate anything. But then in the summer, he takes his time off. So it's the school district does pick up quite a bit of it, which honestly helps us out.
Yes, yes.
But yeah.
So you've got 2 officers on the street, and you've got 1 officer at a school, with all the schools, right?
Yeah, so like right now in this moment, I got my school resource officer probably up at the high school. I got 2 officers on the road, 1 supervisor handling some administrative stuff. My lieutenant, he was headed somewhere, and then me. In January to probably about June, we're going to drop down significantly in staffing. Some of it's for officers that need to take some time off for some personal matters. So we may end up having to put our lieutenant on the road for a while. That's how thin we'll get. But it'll be thin on our end, not where the community's going to feel it. And then we'll just kind of have to pick up each other's slack a little bit. So I may have to pick up a few of the lieutenant's duties, and then it just kind of trickles down. So it'll be a little thin for a while, but on the administrative side.
So it's a good thing we had her come in December instead
Yeah,
of January.
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I think it's wonderful that you could take the time off to meet with us.
Yeah, and I don't know how many of you get the ability to get online often, but what I've been doing is on the Oregon Police Department website, so it's technically the village's website, and there's a police icon to click on. What we do is I release our monthly activity reports on there, so if you guys are ever interested to see what's the chief want us to know about the police department, what they're dealing with, it's some interesting stuff. I would strongly encourage you to read it. It's, these OWIs, it's not minor. We find drugs in the car, we find guns in the car, or the person's driving 106 miles an hour on Highway 14. I've gotten a question before, why are you doing so much traffic on 14? Well, our families come back home on 14. We want to keep them safe as they're coming here too. And it's our jurisdiction, but the highway's just as important. And we do have some pretty bad wrecks out there too.
The thing that's makes it difficult for me anyway, and I'm sure it's other senior citizens, we're not all that computer savvy. I don't even know how to get into the village website. I mean, I probably could do it, but I don't take time to do it. And we rely a lot on the Observer. But as you said, I notice now, a lot of the reporters obviously are getting emails from other people to collaborate on their stories. And that's, you know, they need more accuracy probably. But this computer age
It is,
it's
yeah,
gonna pass me by.
yeah. You know, and if Rachel would be okay with it, I'd be happy to provide you a copy to have here at the senior center for people to read. Totally up to you.
We could certainly try it. If
Yeah.
people come in and read it, we certainly wouldn't mind having it if it
Yeah.
turns out that,
I mean, it would
you know,
be
we get it every month.
a hard copy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
A hard copy.
Yeah, pieces of paper
I
in a
know,
full, in a
exactly,
binder.
paper.
Yeah, kind of
Or if you
like
put
the,
it in the newsletter,
That got me
the
too when they started
email
calling
site
that
that we
hard
could
copy.
go to,
Yeah.
because I don't
It's a
know
piece of
either
paper.
what
Yeah.
email site would take me to the village, and then I didn't know about the police thing.
yeah.
Yeah, if we could maybe put that in a newsletter or something.
Well, I can tell you it won't go in the next, the next one is solidly full and about to be printed.
Yeah, and these are
So
long.
don't look forward for the January one.
And these are long reports. What was it, 4 or
She's
5
just looking
pages?
for the
No,
link.
I'm just
The
looking
link,
for
yeah.
the link, you know,
Yeah.
because if you don't have the right link, you don't get into it.
Yeah, and it's some interesting information in there. Sometimes when I see a scam out there too, so I'm do that whole report. Sometimes when I see certain scams out there too, I'll push them out. But I'm sorry, my allergies are so bad with this warm weather.
So if y'all are on Facebook, you can follow the police department that way and find out information about scams or things like what they're saying about our hurricane force winds and all those kinds of things.
But what's confusing to me, and I probably should take a class on it, is there more than one Facebook?
No.
I mean, if you're on Facebook, can you get to what you just said?
Yep.
So you go to Village of Oregon,
So there's a little almost like a little magnifying glass that's a search.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if you click on that, then there's a place you can type in, so, and then you can actually put in there Village of Oregon, Wisconsin, or Village of Oregon, Wisconsin Police Department, and you'll get the site, it'll then take you to that.
Maybe I don't even want to get into all that.
Well, and unless you have your own Facebook page, this isn't gonna do
No,
anything.
no, you have to be on
You have to
Facebook.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're on Facebook, if you don't have an account on Facebook, then no.
Well, no, I guess we have one. I mean, it's gotta be there.
That's how I
Not
am with Facebook.
necessarily.
Well, no, because I see Royce's name.
There you go.
Yeah, and there too, I put just noteworthy stuff, but we have it available on our website too, because I don't like Facebook. I think it's very toxic. I think all social media platforms are toxic. So what we do is we just put a link to our website on Facebook and say, click on this and it'll bring you over here to try to keep the comments. I guess while we're talking about social media, one of the other challenges is there's law specifically written to cover crimes that happen on social media and cybercrime in general. And I think people's expectations of how people should behave on social media is different than what's in law. And so sometimes people expect us to be able to come in and shut down a website or take information down. And unless a serious crime has been committed, for example, a pornographic image is put out there of a child, if it's something like that, first of all, there's filters out there that should have already not let that go up. But that's the sort of stuff we can act on. But there is freedom of speech protection, and companies have the right to put certain information on their websites and social media. And so there are times, and it happens often, where we ask a company, can you please take this down? And they say, you got a court order? And we say, we can't get one. The crime hasn't been committed. And they say, sorry.
Okay.
And it really ties our hands. So I think people's expectations of what police can do is way different than what we can actually do. And we have to try to talk through those challenges, but recently I was asked, would I publicly speak about those challenges? There's a problem with that. While there's a lot of great people in our community that I think that information would be helpful to, there's also people that would listen that are preying on our community members and would take that information and it would be helpful to them as they commit those crimes because they would know what we can't and cannot do. So we likely won't be able to do that, is provide that information, but what we always just stress with people, especially parents, is always know what your kids are doing on social media, have a really good understanding of the pictures that are out there, lock everything down. And especially with the real little ones, you know, a lot of these games that they play on these tablets, iPhones, I mean, my kids are this age right now. We always on there ensuring that you don't need internet connection to play those games, because if they need internet connection, there is certainly the ability for outsiders to communicate with your child. And I have heard of this before where there are certain games that exist that pedophiles will watch because they know they're targeting young children, and so they'll act as a young child too, and they'll create relationships that way. And of course, mom and dad, they're trying to cook dinner, things like that, they're not right there, and that these conversations are happening, and kids don't understand what a person may do with a picture or certain information. So what we strongly encourage parents to do is, there's websites you can get on. Department of Justice has great information out there. We'll give that to the village board soon. And we've done videos on it before of just like, here's ideas, here's tips on protecting them. So, but we have investigators specifically trained to help with those cases too. Those are really unfortunate.
Sounds like that could be a whole
Different subject.
It's a mess.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
That's crazy.
it is.
session in itself.
Yeah.
Learn how to,
And there are actually like apps out there that you can put on your children's devices to monitor that, filter that, which is great. But some people, they just give their child a device and like, there you go. And we're trying to help them understand the vulnerability there.
maybe we should go back to the party phones.
Party lines?
Party line, and you just pass your information that way.
Yeah. This is one of those things where it's just this new thing that law and accountability can't keep up with right now.
Right.
Yeah. But, well, thank you for meeting with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, and always welcome to reach out. Love answering questions, love hearing ideas.
Do I have to run?
We have masks on.
That's true. Well, thank you. That was.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.